So the average rate of change, if you look at it in the Learn About It section, looks pretty intimidating, but at the end of the day, this is our formula for the average rate of change. It looks a lot like the slope formula because it's derived from the slope formula. So that means it's basically the slope formula. All of this equation is telling you to do, it's telling you to find the difference from your output. So it's going to give you, two locations that you have to look at. And you need to find the difference of the outputs and you need to divide them by the difference of your inputs. So in one of the examples, I believe it asks you for the rate of change. And I'm going to type this between -2 and 5. So realistically, what we are looking at is if I've got myself a nice little point, I want to go to -2, so I plotted a red dot. I went to -2 on my x-axis, and then I went down to my actual graph, and I need to plot me a point over at 5. So here's 5, and I need to make sure I am, boom, right there on my function. So that's what the line of the average rate of change would look like, and you are actually just finding the slope. So you could find the slope from a graph traditionally, count how many spaces up and how many spaces over. So technically, let's get a line tool here. Boom. Let's go how many spaces up. So let's put it in a different color. I like my colors. I would go, looks like 2 spaces up. And technically, I would then go 7 spaces over. So that's just your regular way to find slope from way, way back in the day. If you want to use the algebra, you are going to do the same thing. Mostly. You just do it the way you were taught. So the difference of the outputs. I've got my 2 red dots pointed or plotted on my graph. The locations I'm looking at is what happens when the graph is at -2. I'm looking at what's happening when the graph is at +5. So at +5, my output is at +1. And at the other location, my output looks like it's at -1. So that's what I've got. My first location, when I'm looking at the value of 5, my output at that location is +1. And my other dot, my output is at -1. So the difference of my inputs. My input of those 2 dots, the first one is located at 5, and my second dot, the one back here, is at -2, and that actually comes from our equation. So I'm just going to put that there. 5 minus -2. Use your keep, change. 1 minus -1 gives you a +2. 5 minus -2 gives you 7, and that's exactly what we got when we counted the slope. Average rate of change is just the slope formula. Once again, you want to place a dot at each location that it's asking you for. I need a dot at -2, so I plotted my dot -2 and where it was on the actual graph. I needed a dot for the input of 5, so I went over to my input of 5 and I plotted my point on my graph. Those 2 dots are the ones that I'm trying to find the slope of. I can count it or I can calculate it.